Tocci.
And I'm Ryan Tocci. Is this heaven?
No, Ryan, it's the How Could You podcast.
How could you podcast? I could have sworn this was heaven.
Well, welcome everyone. If you're just joining us for the first time, thank you so much for checking out our podcast. We are two people who fell in love at a movie theater and never quite left. We created this podcast to fill a lot of gaps in film knowledge, and then it has evolved to talk about our favorite films, including the one we are going to be talking about today.
I was just talking to somebody today. They asked me what our podcast was about, and I was explaining to them the original concept, and I'm like, we do a lot of movies that we've seen at this point, so it's evolved.
Yeah, it's evolved. You should have said false. It's about movies, right? It's always been about movies.
Nice. Very good.
So I am going to ask, we always start off the episode with the Tossi's takes, and I'm going to make this a group Tossi's takes, and it's going to be a hot take. Is this the best summer movie lineup we have had in quite a few years?
It's hard to argue. I mean, it's there's such a excitement going on right now with the summer blockbuster, and I don't know what that is. I mean, it's hard not to look at the last couple of years and think that there's a nostalgia and, of some of these films that are coming out. But yeah, I am with you. There seems to be a lot of excitement. I also don't know, is it the film base in the theaters not dilute it a little bit? So, like, you're not going to the theater to see 16 different movies like in years past. It's focusing in on one big one. Like, it's that one big movie that's coming out each week.
Well, and I remember, so we worked at a movie theater that had 16 screens. And I remember times very vividly where it wasn't that we just had 16 movies. We had movies doubled up on screens because there was that much content to, consume. And I think part of it is exactly what you're saying. There is something nostalgic about going and seeing what I call a big popcorn movie. So you've got Top Gun Maverick and Jurassic World Dominion. You've got Lightyear coming out and Thor Love and Thunder. And I feel like there seems to be this real energy, and credit to Top Gun Maverick, I think, for really signaling this of, we want to be back in the movie theaters. We want to see things big. We want the sound. We want that experience. There seems to be something collectively that we're yearning for, that escape back into the cinema in the summertime.
Our friend John said to us that Tom Cruise single-handedly trying to save the movie theater industry. And he's not wrong.
He's not wrong, because I think the energy around Top Gun Maverick, look, you and I have complained a lot about how long they waited for this movie. And I kind of feel like, you know what? Complaints have now been completely, erased by the fact that they waited the perfect amount of time. Almost like they waited for people to be ready for things. And certainly there are, a lot of factors with the pandemic that played into that. But as things were coming back out, I think you and I were like, okay, just release Top Gun Maverick. This is getting kind of ridiculous. But in some ways, I wonder, did they release it at the right moment with the right slot of films coming after it to really have this little summer renaissance of people returning to the theater? I can't remember a time, even in the before times, where I was hearing so many people saying that they're not only going out to the theater once, but multiple times to see a film.
Yeah, I agree with you. People that, told us, tell us all the time they don't like the movie theater, that are going to see it, yeah, like you said. I've heard people going to see it 3-4 times. They're getting t-shirts the second time, other times to go see it. There's something really special about Maverick that's happening. I don't find myself to be a cynical person. I don't think that I am. I think I'm generally pretty optimistic. I can, kill my darlings when I'm talking about things, and I can, and sometimes look at things in a negative way, but I try to look at it in a negative way, in a constructive way. I recently said to you that it's not, do we have that thing that kind of brings everybody together, that everybody gets excited, that we live in a kind of a time because of whatever you want to, put in here, social media or whatever, 24-hour news cycle, that we don't have the type of pop culture hits without this whole negative side. It's like 50% will like it and 50% are going to come at it. And with Top Gun Maverick, I think I might be wrong. It feels like the one movie that no one's really attacking in a negative way. And I'm not saying that there aren't outliers out there, and if you've seen Maverick and you don't like it, that's okay. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about this overwhelming, kind of buzz about it. And it's it's huge buzz. I mean, people are talking.
Would you say that they buzzed the box office?
Yes. Yeah, like it's fun to hear people talking about it. I mean, you and I were late on seeing it. We generally go see the big movies on the first night they come out for a lot of different reasons. We waited so we could go see it with some friends. But I've never had so many people texting me, emailing me and things like, did you see it? Have you seen it? Like, they had all gone and seen it, like, the opening weekend, and it was wild, and it was awesome. It was awesome to see. And I get it, because when you watch the movie, it's hard to say that it hits every group that you could possibly ask for.
And I think the thing that I find so electric and magnetic about it, I mean, obviously, like, however you personally feel about Tom Cruise, you can't deny the power of his Hollywood stardom. Like, you can't deny he is charming as all get up and still is. And I think there was something about this where there's kind of this revelatory moment of, like, let's hold hands and have centralized pop culture again, and, like, something that it feels like everyone's kind of talking about because, you and I have talked on this podcast a lot about the, kind of stratification of pop culture and the pros and cons of this. And this is a real argument for when there's a movie that kind of, like, begs for everyone to see it because it's hitting such a nostalgia aspect of it. But I do think there are a lot of young audiences that are really, certainly I have talked to young people and I'm like, you did not grow up with this movie. I mean, this movie came out literally the week before I was born. So it's always existed with me. Like, and I love Top Gun, but like Top Gun Maverick seems to just be, like you said, it's pulling a lot of people in. And I say, like, for those of you who went out and paid the money and took the time to go and see it, like, please keep doing this with theater experiences. I hope that it sparked something for a lot of people to be like, this is why you want to watch it this way. It's not that you can't enjoy movies at home, and certainly all of our televisions are at a high def, right. That I could have never conceived of. I'm sorry. No, I didn't think stuff in 2004 looked terrible on TV, but I now know that it did. When you watch it now, but like, I certainly understand the convenience of it, but there's also something magic about seeing a theater at 1:00 on a Saturday over a week after Top Gun Maverick came out, and it's pretty full.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened in a while.
Yes.
So it's a kind of exciting time.
Yeah, my work was funny. You were talking about when you were born. I had a funny moment at my work because a gentleman, a coworker by the name of Nick, who I love talking to, he loves film, and we go back and forth. He gives me great recommendations. I give him some, or at least I give him recommendations. Hopefully he likes some of the ones. But we get in good conversation, and I laughed because he's a big movie fan. And something came up about Top Gun, and he had not seen it, and he had mentioned because that he had not seen it, and he got completely lambasted with so many how could yous. Literally, I saw our entire podcast come into focus in this moment. I just sat back. Poor guy, and it was the thing, he wasn't born in 1986, so it didn't necessarily connect from that standpoint, but I just had to laugh with that. But then I was loving and seeing at my work again, they started putting up call signs, like we were all picking call signs at work, and where were you in had the 1980s. Yeah, it's just this great, kind of give and take now with audiences. Yeah, we went with friends that brought their kids. Yeah. Like you said, and Ryan, who, was the son that was with us, he said to me after, he's like, I didn't even need to see the first one to enjoy this. Like, so that really, that's what just makes it great. It's a film that hits nostalgia, and also it's its own thing. It's very cool.
Yeah, and I think there's well said on all, and there's something fun about, like, people kind of coming together. I think that's, like, our favorite part of film, and I think it's certainly why we do this podcast, is, like, people just coming together to enjoy things, and it's, like, not about being critical or analytical. It's just about enjoying, like, hey, I saw a movie and it made me happy, and it was, like, a fun escape.
Yeah, I like what you're saying there, and I agree with you. You and I, when we do our nostalgia cinema at the Civic Theater, we always kind of started out by explaining, like, the intention of that show is to be of just a bunch of friends in a living room talking with each other, and it's about connecting over film, about and that shared experience, and I think that's cool. It's that water cooler talk, right? And I agree with you, now that we have Jurassic World Dominion coming out, and I can't wait to see what kind of plays out with the rest of the summer now. Time will tell. Was Maverick just as kind of its own thing, and eventually it will kind of even itself out, but the films coming out sound great. Although I did have to say, my Tossi's take might be the summer of all summers was summer of 1982 on film.
Oh, hit us with some nostalgia here, Toss.
All right, it wasn't my thing. I saw it was a tweet that was put out by Sean Fennessy of The Ringer, but my mind was blown by the films that came out that year. The Thing, Blade Runner, E.T., Poltergeist, Conan the Barbarian, Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan, Diner.
Sorry.
No, Diner, Rocky 3, The World According to Garp, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and An Officer and Gentleman. That's what you could have seen in that summer of 82.
Okay, so summer of 2022 sucks by comparison.
You know what? With all we've been through, I am excited for the summer of 2022.
No, but I love looking at those time capsules of also, it's that reminder, too, of when summer movie season was really a time to put a lot of films that you really wanted to get eyes on it. Like, you think, summers for being outside. No, summer's for escaping in a movie theater. And, all right, for me anyways, I'm an indoor house cat, so, I don't want to be outside. But, I think there's, when you, rattle off that list of titles, so many of those became classic, and also it's weird to think, E.T. is having its 40th anniversary this year. I don't mind saying this now, but sneak peek, that will be my birthday episode this year, so look for that drop on July 7th.
Hot take coming in. Or I guess not that.
No.
Breaking news. Sorry.
That'd be breaking news. But it's fun to look at those summers where you could see where, it's not just about, those were probably the best movies that came out that year, but, you're talking in a decade, some of those would rank up in the top of the decade. That's a pretty solid summer.
Yeah. All Soul Films original.
Well, yeah, there's that too, is you don't have the sequel thing. We're a little bit more plagued in sequels, I think, now.
Yeah,
but I don't have
time changes, yeah.
And I also think, part of where a sequel like Top Gun Maverick can be so successful is it plays upon that nostalgia factor of people remembering movies that they have watched and rewatched and then want to expose, kind of the next generation to. And then become, cornerstones of American pop culture. Top Gun certainly is in that space. Something like E.T., which is, a cornerstone, not just of American pop culture, but American film culture, obviously, too. And it's hard to talk about Americana without, of course, talking about baseball. America's pastime. For some people, when you think of Americana, it's one of the first things that you'll list. It's as American as apple pie. And, and because of that, film has dedicated a lot of time into telling stories about baseball, which is certainly what we're going to do today. But before we get into the absolutely iconic Field of Dreams, do you have, a favorite baseball movie, maybe outside of Field of Dreams?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think as I get older, Field of Dreams is probably going to be number one.
That's fair.
But I grew up, I loved the Major League movies. So if you ask me my favorite baseball films, I'm going to go to Major League, both 1 and 2.
I remember seeing those as a kid and thinking, there are a lot of jokes here I'm going to get later.
I haven't watched it in a few years. I'm trying to remember. I don't know if it would survive the holdup.
Probably not.
Or not. But I'm curious. I mean, the team name alone doesn't, since, the actual baseball team had to change their name because of it. But that being said, it's just a film that, those two films, I really funny, quote all the time, still quote, with our friends. I mean, those are going to be on the top of my list.
Yeah, I mean, mine's, I think it's would be a lot of people's as a league of their own, for a variety of reasons. One, I mean, the time period always sucks me in. Give me something in the 1940s and a good, victory roll and I'm all about it. But I think also, too, it was a female-centric sports movie in a time when those did not come out, and kind of still don't.
I was about to say, unfortunately, that's hasn't really changed too much.
It's Tom Hanks, in such an incredibly iconic performance. Kind of same thing. It's very quotable. It's incredibly rewatchable.
Lauren, do you like Tom Hanks?
And love Tom Hanks, and you know it's tough. But it's one of those movies that, because it's such like a good enduring sports story, and it's at times like pretty sad. But I have to be honest, I didn't love it because it was a baseball movie. And so I think I pose the question to this as someone who did not grow up loving baseball. Okay, audience, please don't hate me. It's not but I really attach onto baseball films. But I'm not a watcher of baseball. Can you explain the psychology of this for me? Because I always feel very torn on how much I love baseball films, going to baseball parks, and the whole atmosphere of baseball, but don't actually like watching baseball.
It's funny, yeah, because when we go on vacations, a lot of times we've gone to baseball games, and it's not something we normally do at all. I think it goes back to, I think there's two things here. I think one, it goes back to the fact of what you were talking about, the Americana of it. There's something to be said. It reminds you of summer. It reminds you of, people talking about it. It's so, again, not to get too ahead of ourselves here with Terence Mann's speech, but it's always around us. Baseball, lasts 24 months a year. So it's always being played. It's just part of the American, kind of machine. And I think that plays to it. I think the fact that there are so many baseball films that get put out because it means a lot to a lot of people. It was so instrumental to a lot of families and to a lot of people and growing up and so that's why we get these great films that are put out. And so there are so many films that I think that plays into why you kind of adapt to it. You like a good baseball movie because there are so many of them.
Well, and I think it's if you ever wanted complete proof that we're in some sort of calculated simulation, I would say it's the way in which I get very sappy during the fireworks sequence in The Sandlot when they just want to go play baseball. I didn't play baseball. I didn't play stickball. This is not something I did as a child, but it hit something for me. And I'm I think we got programmed at some point to feel things about baseball.
You and your brother, though, didn't even play, wiffle ball or anything like that out back or anything?
I kind of remember them being there. Our big things, we played a lot of flashlight tag in the neighborhood. That we spent a lot of time at the community pool. And those things I feel very, nostalgic about, the summer.
I do like those really good flashlight tag movies, though. Those are solid.
Someone give me a good flashlight tag movie. Be really hard on the cinematographer for that. But, I think that's why I find this exploration kind of interesting, because I think about I feel very sentimental about movies like The Sandlot, A League of Their Own. I cannot express how much I love the movie 42. I mean, obviously if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, we're huge Chadwick Boseman fans, of course, but it's such an incredibly, if not, very trying movie at times, but so well done. And I think it's because, there is this, it feels, woven into the culture. And it's, you almost just kind of have to submit over to it of, understanding, for a lot of people. And I think I really admire people's fandoms. Obviously, we talk on this show, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. My Oscars thing borders on unhealthy. And so I think I love recognizing other people's fandoms. And certainly baseball has that.
Good baseball caps. Good, yeah.
The outfits are way cute. It's the girliest thing I've ever seen.
Dad, though, he was a big baseball fan, right?
Yeah, both of my parents are big baseball fans. They used to, so my parents are big Yankees fans. My brother's a Mets fan. They used to go to the Subway Series, and and I think that probably is that. But I don't remember sitting down and watching a baseball game. I'd watch football, I'd watch hockey and soccer. This is terrible. If you love baseball and are listening to this, please don't disown me.
I don't think you are dismissing it though. No. I don't, and I think most people listening realize that they recognize not everybody can attach to all fandoms, right? And I get that, and I think most of our listening audience with that, and even the baseball fans, I think they probably, not speaking for our audience, are appreciating the fact that you can still have a love for it, or an affinity for it, or
I respect it a lot, I think, is what it comes down to.
A respect for it, without really it being your thing. It's not other than the time I took you to that 17-inning game.
I hated you so much by the end of that game. And you're there's gonna be fireworks, we need to stay. I fell asleep.
You did. I felt bad for you. I mean, that game went late, and yeah. But no, I think there's nothing that you're saying. I don't think that you're saying anything bad about it. It's not like you're like, I hate baseball.
No, I think that's the thing, is there's an affinity and a respect for it, and which leads us into talking about this film today, which is Field of Dreams. Do you remember the first time you saw Field of Dreams? Because this is not a how could you for either of us. We've both seen this movie, grown up with this movie.
I mean, I do not remember the first time I saw it. It's one of those movies that's just there. It's like, I know I saw it probably pretty close to, like, yeah, we didn't go to the theater a lot when I was a kid. So I didn't see it in the movie theater. So we would have just saw it at home at some point, probably around, whenever it was coming out on, VHS, or you could rent it or whatever. But I loved it as a kid, and it just stayed with me all those years.
Well, and it's weird is I have the same story. I don't remember the first time I saw Field of Dreams. I just know it kind of always existed. So I will say, my first ever celebrity crush was Kevin Costner. I don't think I'm alone in this. The man rocks denim in this movie like nobody can. That is the last thirsty thing I will say the entire podcast. But I will say...
One per show.
Family-friendly podcast. But I will say, it was actually because of Robin Hood Men in Tights, because apparently I thought that medieval mullet was something to, really aspire to in a partner.
I don't care what anybody says. That movie rules.
That movie does rule. But he has a mullet. Whatever, it doesn't matter.
It's Bryan Adams' greatest song.
Truthfully. So I think this is a movie that has really, I think, changed for me as I've grown up. I always thought of this as a baseball movie. As an adult, though, I'm like, no, this is a ghost story, and you won't tell me otherwise. It's a ghost story that has baseball in it. But I remember always thinking of it, really categorizing it as a baseball movie, and then, as I grew up, I was just like, well, this is, a really great ghost story. And also, the how could you of this episode is, how could you not cry at the end of Field of Dreams?
Perfect. Yeah, you're right.
Because that's the real how could you. Do you have no emotions? Are you a sociopath? Were you not hugged enough as a child?
Let us know. We'll come over. We'll give you a nice hug if you
I'll come talk to you. I'll watch the movie and make you cry while you watch it.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, this movie hits a whole lot different now than it used to.
Yup. I think there's a real strategic reason why we've not watched it probably ever together.
Yeah, right.
And now I love this movie and hate it at the same time.
I'm really excited that we decided, let's drop this on Father's Day week.
If you're listening to this, audience, and this movie hits a little different for you now in your adult stage, this is our opportunity. We are reaching out our arms and we are giving you a hug. And we're going to try not to linger in that scene too much, but it's almost impossible not to.
It's a great question, though, that you brought up. And we'll get to all the sappy, emotional stuff down the line here, but... You're talking about this, is this a baseball movie?
Yes.
Okay.
So here, I think it is a baseball ghost story. I think
I think it's a family film.
It is. It's 100% a family film.
Family drama.
I think the thing that sets why this film, I think, has been so enduring. So I was listening to an interview with Kevin Costner, and he said, and he's very honest, I think there is, some actors approach projects with humility. He does not approach this project with that whatsoever. I was listening to an interview with him, and he was signed up to do a film called Revenge, which comes out not long after Field of Dreams. And he kept saying to the director of Revenge, because it kept getting pushed off, and he said, look, I want to go do this movie about corn. That's what he kept saying to the director of Revenge. And he said, and the director of Revenge was like, well, no, you're signed up to do my film. And it kept getting delayed. And he's like, look, I'm going to go do this movie about corn. Sue me if you like. Well, I mean, he's Kevin Costner. And at this point, he is already really cementing his career. So he's already a commodity. So the director waits so he can go do this movie about corn. And then he literally went from this production right into Revenge. One of these movies has stood the test of time and one hasn't. But Kevin Costner said, he feels like Field of Dreams, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. He's like, when I think of American films that have stood the test of time and will continue to do so, he ranks this up with It's a Wonderful Life and Wizard of Oz as an enduring American film.
It's I don't know if I put it to that level. It's not far from it. It's certainly should be in the conversation. But I don't know. I read in some of the research getting ready for the show, I read, something comparing it to It's a Wonderful Life, which I never would have done that on my own, I'll be honest with you, but it makes a lot of sense, obviously. I don't know, those two films are so hard.
So here's the thing I'll say. I'm going to actually try and convince you that he's not wrong. And this isn't because when I was watching this video of him in, well-fitting khakis and a white linen shirt against a field of corn in the summertime, that I'm not somehow swayed by the setting in which he was doing this interview and the fact that it's Kevin Costner. But here's what I'll say. I think the thing is that when you think of like technical film achievements, like Wizard of Oz is so landmark. When you think about films that have become traditions in families and, you think about It's a Wonderful Life, I think this operates similarly. And if I'm making a list of like the 10 like kind of quintessential like American classic films, and I'm trying to spread that out across decades and not do the thing that most people do in those lists where they really zero in on like the 40s and 50s as though that's the only time that golden cinema existed, I think this film has a conversation in it because it does so much. Like, It's a Wonderful Life is not just a Christmas movie. Saying it's just a Christmas movie kind of boxes it into something that it really exists outside of, as you have pointed out, because much of it is not actually about Christmas. So it's not just a holiday film. And I think in this way, like, as we're talking about this, you pose the question back to me, is this a baseball movie? You think it's a family movie? And I think that's the thing. I think Field of Dreams can be kind of that level of iconic because it exists in this way where it transforms for each viewer. You're going to have people who sit down and watch this movie, and to them it's a baseball movie. And you're going to have people sit down and watch it and be like, oh, it's like a family drama. And then you're going to have people sit down and be like, oh, it's about like spiritualism and like, the great beyond. And you're going to have people who sit down and go like, man, thank you for recognizing my troubled relationship with my parent in a film. And I think in that way, like, that's why this film exists the way that it does and has such a hold on people.
Okay, so you've convinced me.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to walk back my comment, but at least let me explain myself, I think, a little bit, because I think it was how I'm viewing the question of, comparing it to It's a Wonderful Life and Wizard of Oz. Those were, like, appointment viewing moments of childhood. It's a Wonderful Life. Everybody views once a year. It's appointment thing. Wizard of Oz, I think, for a time in life was that. I'm curious if it's still this moment very much with families where they sit down and watch that. I hope that it is. It deserves to still be that. So I think I was thinking of it from that standpoint, where I don't see Field of Dreams as that movie that it's like, we have to all sit down and watch this now at the beginning of baseball season or something along that lines. That's not to take a cut at it, because at the end of the day, no, I think it stands the test of time. I think it's one of the greatest films of all time. And when I say that, that's a very big, with the millions of movies that have been made, it's up there. And personally, as I get older, again, we talked about that, it hits different. It's I find more appeal to it even as I and I think that's what a lot of people get out of it. So no, I think you're right. I think it was a good way to point it out, and I'm turning back and changing my answer.
Well, and I also think there's like an emotional resonance with this that suggests like I can only watch this every few years.
Right.
Because like, I won't lie, we sat down to watch and I went, buckle in, have a blankie, you're going to be crying into it.
Yeah, and I don't think you need to have that.
Certainly not.
To enjoy this movie either. I think there's, again, we were talking about this with Maverick, it's a film that can hit a lot of avenues. It's a family movie. It's for the baseball lovers. It's for the sports lovers. It's for the Kevin Costner lovers, as to the left of me. It hits a lot of different notes, I think. So that obviously really, really benefits it as well.
And I think, it starts out, so certainly this film... All right, do we want to talk about cinematography in the opening or the score? Which direction do you want to go? Choose your own adventure.
Let's go score.
Oh, James Horner, you damn genius. James Horner... Legendary composer, Titanic, Avatar, Beautiful Mind, Courage Under Fire, really
Did you throw Courage Under Fire?
Can I tell you, I kind of wish I didn't end with Courage Under Fire.
We're not against that movie. It's just, you just talked about, again, some of the great all-time films.
Yeah, I really realized it was diminishing returns by listing it that way, or maybe I should have only listed 3.
It's fine, yeah. Well, but how could you?
Could you list Courage Under Fire? I think something that I really appreciated about the beginning of this movie, and I think it kind of cuts back to not being able to necessarily put this film in one box or the other, is that opening score to me very much has the resonance of a sports movie. It feels epic. It feels like it's building towards something. I mean, I can just naturally picture people running around a track to it. Like, it feels like a sports movie. All the musical cues feel really cute into that. And then it does this very subtle transition where the music kind of lowers. And when it transitions back in, it sounds to me almost like a horror movie. And not in that ominous way, in that way in which, like, the scores used to be for, like, Stephen King adaptations, particularly, like, miniseries in, like, the 80s and 90s. Like, there's something foreboding, not ominously, but there's some sense of something's coming. And I think that, like, delicate balance is really important here because, you know, the conceit of this movie is this guy is hearing kind of a creepy voice out in the middle of a cornfield. Like, so however you want to frame that, and although I think we can look at this very sentimentally and certainly optimistically, is it's still a ghost is talking to him. And that voice is kind of terrifying.
To be fair, we never know who the ghost is.
That's my point, dude. It could be a demon.
I mean, let me rephrase that. We don't know if it is a ghost. We don't. Fun fact, do you know who the voice is?
No, I actually don't.
That's okay. Nobody does.
Oh,
it's never actually. It's actually in the casting on it. In the credits, it's marked as the voice himself.
Amazing.
There's rumors of who it was. There had been rumors that it was Ray Liotta. He had denied it. There's also the biggest rumor, and seems to be maybe the most possible, is Ed Harris, who may have, he's actually, I don't know if he still is, but it was at least at the time married to Amy Madigan, who played Annie in the film. So there's a lot of thoughts that it was him that did the voice, but no one has ever officially said who the voice was.
I kind of love that there be mystery about it, because there is something to that of, like, no, you don't ever get to know. I mean, I'm sure the next time we watch it in however many years it is from now, I'll be like, well, it kind of sounds like Ed Harris, like, because it's that power of suggestion. I'll be like listening for the voice. But I think that's, you know, and at the start of this film, you have this real, like, dichotomy of things occurring. You have this sense of, you know, Kevin Costner never plays this really with fear. He plays it with curiosity, bewilderment, certainly at times frustration of not knowing really where this voice is emanating from. But it's not played for any type of horror. I think the score is the thing that kind of informs there's something mystical happening here. And certainly the dichotomy being this very strange thing that's occurring for this man and this very beautiful setting of this farm in the middle of Iowa, what we know to be Dyersville, Iowa, which is the actual location of it. And
gorgeous.
It's truly an experience. We had recorded a podcast episode that talked about this when we did how we spent our summer vacation, and we went around to all these filming locations. And I would say our favorite of which was seeing the Field of Dreams, ball field and house, and having that experience. Because there is something kind of magical about that place, you know, and credit to the location scout who saw it, took the photos, and went, it seems like it should be here.
Yeah.
And because there is something that feels really special about it. Maybe it's the fact that it's set in Iowa and it actually takes place in Iowa that helps add to that. There's, like, a veracity to how this space looks.
They had a time limit that they had to get that corn grown, and it was... They were a little nervous whether it was going to get grown in time.
Well, because it had been the worst drought since the Dust Bowl. And so they were literally bringing in water from the Mississippi River to try and get it. Because one of the things that they realized is they were like, because they wanted these beautiful shots of, like, Kevin Costner amongst the corn. So they were under this, like, it had to be grown. They were spraying the grass green.
So it had to be, the corn had to grow over 6 foot tall so that it would be taller than Kevin Costner.
But then then, oddly, it grew too tall.
Right.
And they had to construct a platform for him because it ended up being this like incredible craft.
That's just, I mean, to me, that's probably like a badge of honor in Iowa, right? Like, you want it 6 foot corn? Here's 7.5 foot corn.
Yes. And so this was, so it was the Lansing family farm. It was owned by, so the guy who owned it, who's by the last name of Lansing, his first name is escaping me right now. He had this field, like he had no intention certainly of fame with it. He just really, understood the kind of the story that they wanted to tell. He was willing to kind of offer up the space and then kind of kept this ball field with the idea that, people wanted to come visit it. He was very open to that. He lived there with his wife, who he met on a bus trip. He was like a confirmed bachelor, had no like intentions of marrying, was like so swept away by his wife, this like beautiful love story. When he retires, they end up selling it, to a woman whose son played Little League, and she wanted to buy this farm and create this space where, people could come and they could play baseball. And she had, kind of these grand intentions of, creating this like complex, so it's this really like kind of, people have like really owned this space, for, not only for its like film history, but there is something kind of magical. And honestly, if you ever find yourself there, I was taken with it. It felt magical. Which is why I think those opening shots of Kevin Costner look so incredible, because that's just how beautiful Iowa looks.
I would love to talk to you about this opening, because I want to get your feelings on it. I forgot how much they set the table on this right at the beginning of this movie. Really, with the narration from Kevin Costner. Do you like the narration? Do you think it sets up the film nicely?
I do, and I think because there's an element of it that calls to form of like, this does come from a novel, which is actually told in first person. The novel being Shoeless Joe, which actually, do you know what the original title of the novel was supposed to be?
I know the Dreamfield was one of the titles he had.
It was the title he wanted most. The publisher said no and forced him to name it Shoeless Joe, and then this gets named Field of Dreams. Right. But they had no idea. Because my understanding is the test audiences hated the name of the film. Yes.
Yeah. And at one point, the title of the book was also going to be The Kidnapping of J.D. Salinger. Yes. But for legal reasons, they had to change that.
Which we'll get to.
Yeah, and the film definitely never took that title.
No, and I think why the narration works is because it sets up and distills, like, very quickly, like, the relationship he had with his father. He has that great quote, "We had to find other things to fight about." Like, and this idea of, like, kind of this troubled relationship, not without love, but certainly, like, not without its nicks either. And I think why that's important is it kind of sets up his personality. It sets up, like, kind of his rebellious streak. The fact that he was, like, very much, like, in the 60s, like, counterculture movements, that he is someone who, for lack of, better, doesn't seem like he should be in the middle of a farm in Iowa. Like, it says, like, I think it sets up about Annie, like, the only thing we had in common is that she was from Iowa and I knew where Iowa was. Like, it is really, like, kind of, like, fun.
I'm going to come back to that quote in a moment.
Wait, why?
Because there are a lot of things that you have to suspend disbelief in this, or believe in this, I guess. But one of them is Ray, who didn't know anything about Iowa and just kind of became a farmer and struggling with his farm. But the man knows how to make a perfect baseball. I mean, the most beautiful, perfect baseball diamond at the moment's notice.
It's Kevin Costner. I don't understand why you're having
Kevin Costner. You were the one that gets so mad at me because anybody that watched the Field of Dreams baseball game last year between the White Sox and the Yankees, and Kevin Costner coming out of that field and just held the audience forever because he was taken in the moment.
It was magical.
It was so mad every time. I mean, it was a cool moment. It was a very cool moment, but it was like Costner. He took in that moment as long as he possibly could.
I thought you were going to say the most unrealistic part of this, or where you have to suspend your disbelief that his wife just so willingly is like, sure.
Well, yeah, that's a great point. One of my questions I literally have written down here was, would you be as supportive as Annie?
You know I'd be as supportive as Annie.
I really do. And I actually wrote that down. I went, of all the wives in the world, I know that my wife would be as supportive as Annie. You'd be like, oh yeah, you probably did hear that short.
If you
probably more so than Annie.
If you were like, I need to construct a wrestling room in our backyard, I'd be like, you have your reasons. Because this is one of my favorite things, because, like, Ray says it's illogical, and Annie responds, "That's what I like about it."
Yeah.
She's so great, but I think it's such like a Annie's character. Everything all day. Love her, obsessed with her, love her energy.
It's one of my favorite things about this movie is, there's so much, obviously, but Ray and Annie's relationship, first and foremost. I think they are fantastic. I'm glad that the film never feels like we need to have this butting of heads or strife. Like, yeah, there's a couple of times she questions, but she still supports.
Well, and I think there's like you talk about this as like a family drama, and I think like one of the important things of this is like, you have certainly the thing with the brother-in-law, right? Like, he is thinking about this more in terms of like the practicality of like, he doesn't want them to lose their farm, and like, you can kind of, for the most part, understand why Mark, as played by Timothy Busfield, is interjecting. But it's really the only like drama at the center of this, because she is so supportive, and I think she just believes in the fact that if he's saying he's hearing this voice in the corn, I believe that that's actually happening. And I love how she does not question it. I also love how he gets frustrated, but also doesn't really question it either.
No, it's a calling. And I think, it's following that belief, following that calling to you. But I also, like you said, like, other than Mark, and even a little bit, you could argue Terence Mann to some degree, but for the most part, it doesn't feel like it needs to be bogged down in these over dramatic, moments of disagreement. In fact, I think that's such a mark in the positive to it. I think it really makes it. I love the fact that, these really strange things that we don't really ever get full explanations on are happening, but people just accept it. They give over to it, I think is really something really wonderful. And I agree with you with Mark is the only real, and which is actually why the author said the film gets a 4 out of 5 stars to him as opposed to 5, because he actually thought that Mark was not villainous enough in the film version compared to his book.
I know, but that's kind of what I like about it, because it's like, I like that once Mark is given reason to believe in it, he also gives himself over, because I think there is something, and I think this comes back to why this is such a classic, to Kevin Costner's point of like putting it in like the rankings of things like It's a Wonderful Life and Wizard of Oz. People do just want to believe in something. They want to feel like, I don't need it answered for me. I think there is so much in our lives that we need answers, and so many things that we have to demand the answers for, that when those magical things come across of like, I don't know if I need this one explained, I just kind of need to believe in it. And I love that moment when Kevin Costner sees Shoeless Joe Jackson for the first time. This beautiful sequence of the camera is inside the house and it moves into the field, and you see Shoeless Joe, coming out of the corn. The reveal of it is so incredible. He's transformed, he's humbled, he's starstruck, he becomes childlike in his admiration of what he's seeing. And not just because it's, a ghost. There is literally a ghost in his backyard. He just gives over to like, yeah, of course that's Shoeless Joe. What else is there to think about this situation other than it's Shoeless Joe Jackson? And I think, and certainly the credit to the source material here of just going, sometimes you just have to believe in something if it's put in front of you. And I think there's something so beautiful and so life-affirming about that as well.
I think it's a good time to discuss Shoeless Joe Jackson, for a lot of different reasons, most notably by its portrayal, which by Ray Liotta, which, when we had made the plan to do this, felt it's much different now.
Of course.
Discussing him and this character. Anybody that saw that we had put out what our next films are, it's going to be this, and actually Goodfellas, that was all planned out before, recent events. So when that happened, it was a little chilling in that, we have to, unfortunately, it's so sad that we have to talk about that aspect of it, that losing such a phenomenal, such an iconic actor. And just the sadness of losing an individual in this world is always sad. But Ray Liotta is so notable, iconic to his Hollywood career, and probably most notably for the 2 films that we are going to be talking about over the next couple of weeks. What can we say about this portrayal?
Well, it's incredible, and it like anchors the film with like a necessary cool that I think like kind of comes with like, you know, because Kevin Costner's character is just again like kind of childlike and like gleeful about this. And you know, there's almost something like an edge in how Ray Liotta does it, almost like skeptical of like what he's seeing, where he asks him, is this heaven? No, it's Iowa. Like, you know, this idea of like, he's being given the second chance and is almost like wary of it to a certain degree. I love that kind of subtlety in Ray Liotta's performance. I mean, you know, I think so much of what we think of like Ray Liotta's, and Soren we'll talk about in our next episode with Goodfellas, are these kind of like harder characters. And I think there's like a real sensitivity that he has in this portrayal. You know, I'll say it. Of course, the holdup is that Shoeless Joe actually batted left and pitched right, but it absolutely does not matter because is it the batting coach that said?
No, it's the director. The director one time, you know, and I believe I've used it on this show before for other things. But yes, it's one of my favorite all-time director moments, and sometimes I have to check myself with it, which he had said, you know, everybody's complaint is that Shoeless Joe Jackson is batting, you know, the wrong way. Nobody seems to bat an eye about the fact that, you know, eight ghosts are coming out of a cornfield and playing baseball, which is really true. I mean, you know, it's okay. We're good. It doesn't have to be historically accurate.
And again, like it comes back to what we've been saying. It's about giving yourself over. I mean, when all 8 players come out of the corn, I mean, chills. Like, you know, it's this one iconic shot, and 2, it's this idea of like redemption and like how excited they are just to play and like the love of the game. And again, like although not being the most massive baseball fan, this understanding of like when you really love something and you just want to do it and you just want that second chance at doing it, and that's what brings all of these icons of the game to this space in their ghostly form.
Is there a more chills again kind of moment? I love just the scene when Gabby Hoffman comes in after, you know, Ray's been waiting for this, and we know it's been months, you know. Yeah. We've seen the change of the seasons, and she comes in, and it gives that, you know, there's a man out on your lawn. Just like, and there you go, Horner's, you know, score.
Oh,
just hits that right, you know, note, and it's just like, okay, you know, here it is. And then just the chemistry between Ray Liotta and Kevin Costner is extraordinary.
It's incredible. And it's interesting to see, and this is the power of Ray Liotta's performance, to see an actor that can make Kevin Costner look small in a scene. Like, because there is something about him. He's so much, his presence is so strong and so domineering that like they're in, and because you get Kevin Costner kind of almost like sinking into himself, like, is this happening? Like, this is my reality, is that I made this ball field and now these ghosts are playing in my ball field.
Well, there's such a, you know, and I believe my understanding, you know, of Shoeless Joe Jackson was he was a quiet individual, you know, very soft-spoken individual, but like Ray Liotta plays this in this just perfect way, but you're hanging on literally. I mean, I don't even know how many lines he actually has in this movie, but you hang on every single word he says, every piece of dialogue, and you were just talking about these moments with him. It's, you know, we talk about the hardness of some of the characters that Ray Liotta plays in other films, but in this one, it's, you know, he's soft-spoken, he's taking it all in, but there's something that somehow he finds this level of a twinkle in his eye that just, it's not on his face, but you see the joy in his eyes. It is one of the best piece of acting without doing any, I don't even know how to explain it. It's
playful.
Just brilliant.
Well, and I think it's really everyone who populates that field. Like, I always think about, like, Art LaFleur.
Peter LaFleur?
Stop. This is not a dodgeball episode.
I know who.
Oh, the Tooth Fairy from Santa Claus 2.
God, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he plays I think it's Gandalf is how you pronounce it. And I think, like, there is something about, like, his performance and portrayal, like, you know, like Frank Whaley when he plays Archie Graham, like, there's something about the players in the field. They feel authentic. Like, they feel like, oh, I think these guys came from the 1918 Worlds or 1919 World Series. Like, it feels, I mean, there's something very authentic about it, and I think that's, like, obviously anchored by Ray Liotta being, like, such, like, a leading presence, like, on that field with that performance.
The other big thing I want to talk about with that scene between Ray and Shoeless Joe is the sound editing. How just geniuses it because it's
Truly.
so good. I mean, between the crickets and you know, the sound of the dirt when they're walking on it, you can even hear the grass. You know, just the crack of the bat. Like, we're just watching it now. I couldn't even imagine seeing that in a theater. But like just watching it at home, I was engulfed in this film. Like I felt there. Like I could feel myself being out there with these two.
Well, and I think that that's a really important thing to note because there is so much, again, like, I'm talking about veracity a lot, but it's like, and you also have to control a lot of those elements because you have to think about, like, what does a field sound like at this time of night and all of the things that we expect to hear. And what does baseball sound like close up? You're right. There is so much done with like the sound editing and mixing in this film that's like so important, again, to like adding to that atmosphere. And, you know, because you can't just rely on score alone. It has to feel real. And I have to feel like I'm there. And I think you point that out well. You know, from that initial sequence of we have confirmed that there are ghosts and they are real. You know, Ray has to go on a side quest, but not before, you know, a live look at any school board meeting in 2022, which is Annie having to defend the works of Terence Mann, which is such a great introduction to who is going to be a very significant character in the movie, which is talking about Terence Mann's work. I am Annie. Annie is me.
Yes. So much. Yes.
When she calls that woman a Nazi cow, I cheer. Like it's great.
And I just love her. She is so good throughout this whole movie, but her energy after that scene when they go out into the hallway and just, you know, her punching the air.
She's like shadow boxing.
Pumped up. And she's like, Ray, give me my moment, basically.
Yeah.
Like, Ray.
You have your ghost. Let me have this school board meeting. But then we get, you know, the introduction to Terence Mann. So the
ease his pain.
Oh, cool. Again, chills all throughout this movie. You know, so in the original novel, this is J.D. Salinger. The reason it's not J.D. Salinger is twofold. Well, actually, it's onefold, but it leads to a very fortunate happening, which is J.D. Salinger threatened to sue. He was very litigious and notably very private, which you can understand if, you know, knowing the story of like how Terence Mann is built as someone who's become reclusive. J.D. Salinger did not want to be used in the film, you know, and threatened legal action because of it. But there's also like another really happy circumstance, which is the director of the film, Phil Alden Robinson, happened to go see a production of Fences, and James Earl Jones was in Fences and saw it and went, that's him. It's that voice. It's that presence. We're going to now rewrite this with, and wrote it with, you know, him playing Terence Mann in mind, which I think is just so incredible. You know, because if you don't know
talking about the Salinger aspect of it, Kinsella actually comes from, it's the writer's, the author's name, but it's also a character name in two of Salinger's books.
Yes, it is.
Which
Yeah.
I thought was,
And because his real name is W.P. Kinsella, and then Ray Kinsella.
But I think the transition to Terence Mann and you know, James Earl Jones is a really good one. I think it works better for the film.
Because no one is playing J.D. Salinger ethereal, and no one's playing J.D. Salinger as really bought into this idea. And honestly, everything I know biographically about Salinger, I can't see him believing it the way that Terence Mann does. Like, so there's just this really, I think, magical aspect of having, you know, that voice feels like it's otherworldly. I mean, James Earl Jones is so iconic in that way, and there's like such an inherent wisdom that he brings to performances that I think if someone was trying to play at J.D. Salinger would have been, you know, a portrayal of a real person versus getting to build this character. And I love how curmudgeonly he is when he shows up. I love that he says to him, peace, love, dope, now get the hell out of here. Like,
I'm gonna say it, might be maybe my favorite James Earl Jones portrayal, you know, Vader voice side.
No, I feel confident saying that too, because and I think there's such like a wonderful way in which you can see like the reason he has shut himself off to the world is because he feels like I fought the good fight and things didn't change as much as they needed to, and I've had to kind of become insulated because what people expect from me and what they demand of me is something that I don't want to be anymore. It's time for someone else to do it. And like, so you completely understand. And then on top of it, like the way he gives himself over to it, like very similar, it doesn't take much. And like, to me alone, you know, they go to Fenway, which I love this. When they went to Fenway, they got to do batting practice, with the team, Kevin Costner hit the green monster.
Did you read Costner saying
No,
this?
no, I swear. I truly promise you, I sourced it a few different spots because I was like, there's no way that's real. No, it's real.
Do you know who was in that scene? In the background? Ben Affleck and Matt Damon are at Fenway.
That's right, because isn't that their, like, the first time they're in a movie, or no? Am I incorrect?
I think they're just extra. I don't know if they get any type of credit for that.
Well, that's just kind of amazing. Well, of course they are. They just exist in Boston, so
right.
of course they would be in the background. But I love, like, the fact that, you know, Kevin Costner's hearing the voice. He's having a reaction to it. Like, he's looking around, and that Terence man just plays that so straight. Like, he doesn't even flinch. And then later on, he's like, of course I heard the voice. Like, it's like this great reveal.
And he's still trying to figure it out, though. He's like, what did I hear, Ray? Like,
yeah. And honestly, a thing that never gets answered in the film. What are you hearing? Like, what are we hearing as the audience? Like, and I think it's whatever you want to kind of believe it is. You know, and I'm certainly sure you've read these too, read the theories that, like, Terrence Mann isn't really alive in the movie, which...
I have not read that.
Oh, there's like
I do not like that.
I don't like it either, and I don't believe... Like, here's the thing, I've seen it argued very well, but I don't believe it to be real, and it's certainly not in the text, you know, in the novel or in the film or intention by the director to make it seem that way. That's more of just, like, a fan interpretation or a fan theory. But I love that, like, he kind of gives himself a, like, now he wants to investigate that. Like, he wants that to be part of, like, how he can kind of help suss out what's going on, like, and that writerly aspect of him, like, even when they go to, you know, which is the next component of going to Moonlight Graham's town. I
do love, though, I have to say, one of my favorite quotes, there's so many, because obviously the big quotes everybody knows, but there are some great just side quotes, and one of my favorites is when Terrence Mann says to Ray, you're seeing a whole team of psychologists.
Yes! Oh my gosh, I wrote that down. Because that's the other thing. I wrote at one point, I was like, I forgot how funny this movie is.
Yes, it finds, again, we talk about that balance, right? It finds that perfect balance of humor without ever being comedy. It's really relatable humor that it's just so good.
Yeah, and I think, you know, and that's, like, the fun thing, too, because, like, you get brought back kind of into the mystical element when they go and they visit Moonlight Graham's town. You've got the great sequence of Kevin Costner just walking around with a ghost, which, again... Like, I don't know why. I always forget about the fact that he sees him as, like, I don't know why. Every time we watch the movie, I've watched this movie, I forget. I'm like, oh, that's right. Moonlight Graham, like, walks around the town with him for a while, which is like, I'm like, does anyone else see him? Is it like the baseball field? Do you only see it if you believe into it? Like,
do you know who the first choice to play Moonlight Graham was?
I do. Yeah. It was Jimmy Stewart.
Yes, it was. Bringing it back to that It's a Wonderful Life, right?
Yeah. Yes. And, you know, so Burt Lancaster takes this role. It ends up being his final film role. So Burt Lancaster, very famous for being in The Birdman of Alcatraz and From Here to Eternity, among being just like a classic Hollywood icon. You know, but takes this on as like his last film role. And I think because of how the character of Moonlight Graham plays out, it feels like kind of like a perfect last film role. I hate saying it that way, but in so many ways it does. And I love like his presence and like how they talk about like his, like the purpose of like what he did with his life. I love like how Moonlight Graham is kind of stuck in this like loop of where he's like, well, I have to get home. Like my wife's waiting for, there's just like something very sweet about it.
The best part about this is it's actually, his character's real.
Yeah, right?
Which I just was like, and really became a doctor. And that's where I think Terrence Mann makes kind of that comment of like, you know, yeah, he didn't make it, but think about what would have happened in this town had he made it, right? Like, They wouldn't have had him there. I think it's a beautiful way of talking about, you know, sometimes, you know, not getting your dreams can actually be really wonderful things, or I think reviewing them. It's a really, you know, it's a really great sentiment that just gets plopped in the middle of this already, you know, existential film.
I mean, like, I feel like how we're talking about this movie is so profound. Like, it's just, because it really makes you have to, like, think about, and, like, you know, whatever, like, you know, your beliefs or non-belief or, like, whatever your, like, system is of, like, what you kind of follow, like, it makes you analyze, like, a lot of things about just, like, kind of life path and journey. And I love that they include like Terence Mann going and interviewing, people in the town, because that was actually, that's what the writer of the novel, like that's what W.P. Kinsella did. Like he went and interviewed people who knew Moonlight Graham, and that's what gets infused into the novel and then gets infused into this film as well. So there's like really cool thing with that.
One of my all-time favorite performances, Frank Whaley as young Moonlight Archie Graham. I mean, just awesome. One of my favorite performances of all time. I don't know why. There's just it just goes with everybody else in this. Everybody just hits their A game.
What's that? They hit their A game.
Everybody, yeah. Everybody in this movie just hits a home run.
Oh, there you
go. That's some baseball.
Some baseball puns for you guys. See, we know about sports. Which then takes us like kind of back home, because we get Archie Graham where he is supposed to be getting kind of that one last shot. You have the reintroduction of the money woes, which have gotten worse since he's been on this road trip. We don't know how long he's been gone. I don't think it's said. I think you're supposed to think it's a few weeks.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, he's driving to Iowa, to Boston, and then back over to, I think, was it Minnesota?
It's Minnesota. Yeah. So so he's been gone for a little while. And when he comes back, like certainly, things have intensified, but certainly the magic of
he has to go the distance.
No, stop it. You're just really hitting pun game 1,000 today. So you have this, kind of this back to the reality of the fact of like, maintaining the space is going to rely on, finding another way, because he talks about how the corn is, that's $2,500 is what you're losing on that baseball field, which, is a hefty sum of money, especially if you extrapolate that out of however many years you're losing that crop, because that field is there. And you have, again, the reintroduction of the tension with the brother-in-law, who quite literally comes to the house with the intention of going, like, you need to sell this and you need to sell it now. Which then gives us...
Annie's family, just for the record.
Not great.
The biggest, stick in the mud I've ever...
For as, like, you have to think that Annie is the relative in the family that doesn't fit.
Like, even if they are making a joke about the baseball team being there, like, you're gonna have that...
She's so angry about it. She's just like, it's like almost like too much of an overreaction. Like, and you realize, like, there were not a lot of jokes cracked, and you guys all kind of low key hated Annie when she was growing up, didn't you? But you have this, you kind of have this like magical thing that's happening, and now like, where do you go from there? Like, what is kind of the next step? You've gotten Archie Graham back here. You don't have... You have this, like, you're back in the face of the reality of the financial aspects of them. Where does this kind of go? And this is where you get that incredible speech. Yeah. When the brother-in-law is trying to really force his hand and say, like, you have to give up this field. And Terence Mann breaks in with, I'm going to ask you, is this the most iconic sports speech of all time?
It's hard to argue. It's hard to argue against it. I guess it's like, what are you looking for in an inspiring... It is a just inspiring speech. Is it an inspiring, like, pump-up speech? Like, am I going to listen to that speech and then, go out and, get a great workout in? I don't know.
I think I would. It makes me want to run through a wall. Like, believe in things, people. Like...
It is. Yes, it's got to be up there. I mean... Which ones are we thinking, right? There's Any Given Sunday, the Inch by Inch, I know neither of us are,
Miracle.
Miracle, yeah. Definitely. The 2-minute, or the 6-minute speech from Vision Quest.
Yeah.
Miracle.
Hoosiers,
yeah, pretty much anything Norman Dale says. Friday Night Lights, the Perfection speech. Yeah. Rocky Balboa, keep moving forward,
Yeah.
That's how winning is done.
Yeah.
You just keep getting back up. Couple and Rudy, right? Like,
for sure,
the quitting speech that he gets from, Rock. I can't remember his name. I always know him from Rock, The Remember the Titans, the Gettysburg speech.
Oh, the Gettysburg speech kills me every time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, outside of that, what, maybe the replacements, Chicks Dig Scars, I don't know.
Pain fades, glory lasts forever, Chicks Dig Scars.
Probably Miracle is probably the number one. This has got to be number 2.
Well, because it's the whole, like, it's, like, out there, it's our time, like, go out and take it. Like, yeah, I mean, there's, like, no way.
Great moments are born from great opportunity.
Yeah, I always favor the perfection speech from Friday Night Lights. Always makes me kind of, and honestly, anything Coach Taylor does in the TV series Friday Night Lights, every time he talks, I'm in. But I think the thing I like about this is it's not just about, like, and I think, yes, it's a sports speech because it's related to sports, but it's not, like, just about athletic achievement. It's, like, what brings people together. Like, and it's hope. Like, it's people come here because they want to feel hope. And they don't even know why they want to be here. They just want to feel something. And that feels more resonating now than ever. Like, I need Terence Mann to show up, like, real quick and, like, give me a space I can go to. Like, I think it's something, because I think it's something that's timeless. Like, in times of hardship, we just want to go to places where we can feel good and remind us about the good things in life. And whether that's baseball or whatever you're into, like, I think that's what that speech does. It's probably, I wouldn't even say in the great, like, sports speeches of all time, it's just the great film speeches of all time.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you there. And I think that's probably the hard part about it, right? When we lump it into sports speeches, and certainly that, but it kind of transcends something bigger than that. It's almost like boxing it into a sports speech almost does it a disservice to some minor degree. Like
it limits it in some ways, right?
Yeah.
But no, it's obviously it's one of the parts of the movie. I remember, so there's, like, a spot when you go to Field of Dreams, which I'm assuming you're all going to do at some point. They have it printed very large on a wall, like it's a mural. And, like, I can't get halfway through without, like, choking up a little bit just reading it, let alone when you listen to it performed.
You know what I really love about that scene? I love that it's Karen that actually starts it, though. Yeah. I mean, I love that she's the one, the child, like we're talking about, that child wonderment that she sees beyond, and like, the hope, the believing, all of that, where she just kind of says, yeah, Dad, they'll come.
Yeah, and she says it so matter-of-factly, and then they try and kill her. Like,
Mark does definitely, we gotta talk about that. That's gotta come up at some family. Remember the time?
Every Thanksgiving. Yeah. Can you pass me the mashed potatoes? Remember when you almost killed my daughter? Like, every time.
I gotta ask this question. Yeah. I'm gonna poke a little joke. We've been talking very, emotional about the movie. But I have to ask, Ray, when Karen is choking on the hot dog, and granted he doesn't know it, he takes his time. Like, he's trusting in everything that's gonna happen. But the question I will still wonder is, couldn't Ray just picked up Karen and brought her over to the baseball diamond?
No, because he didn't have doctor's training.
Oh, damn, that's good. Yeah, you're right.
Ha! You keep your holdups to yourself, sir. I honestly, the only thing I'll say is the holdup of, like, he waits a really long time. Not Archibald Graham. I'm saying, like, the parents, like, no one's like going, maybe you should just pat her on the back just to see.
Yeah.
That might be what's going on, like, natural kind of reactions.
Gabby Hoffman, though, just, child actor in this movie, just perfect for this role. I mean, Gabby Hoffman, who obviously daughter of Vivia Hoffman, who was one of Warhol's muses as an actress, but just a great career. She was a huge child actor, obviously growing up, but
Now and Then.
Yeah.
Great movie.
But always so good, and even today, I think she always knocks it out of the park. So, but I think she's another one that is just genius in this movie.
Yeah, and I think this, you have that moment, so you have this, like, great speech, and you have kind of this sense of, and then you have, like, Mark going, like, oh, wait, hold on, I can see the ghost now. It's a very, like, Polar Express moment, like, the bell all of a sudden rings for him, and then...
Well, Burt Lancaster just pops up in front of you and saves your niece. You're gonna believe it.
Like, where did that dude come from? But I also think it speaks to the idea of, like, what you said earlier of, like, different paths and kind of, like, maybe the things we want kind of going unanswered, but for good reason, and then, like, kind of like the sacrifice that he makes, but it was, like, enough for him. Like, he felt like, you let me kind of do the one thing I needed to do, and now I can kind of be at rest and be in peace. And I think there's something so beautiful about that. Which leads us to the part of the movie I, like, actually don't want to talk about. Because, if you want to listen to a grown woman weep, hang around for the next 10 minutes. Because then you have one of the greatest reveals, I mean, right up there with Hey Boo from To Kill a Mockingbird, like, where you have the reveal of his dad.
Yeah, I want to get into the emotional portion of this. I have to ask, you talking about this great reveal, do we count this as a twist?
No, it's forecasted the entire movie.
Okay, so that's why we're not seeing that. Okay, fair. Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard not to talk honestly, right? I mean, we are two people that lost our fathers at a young age, or, youngish age. A really young age, we'll say that. So, yeah, this film's gonna hit a whole lot different than it did back in when we saw it as kids, than as you're seeing it as an adult, having world experience and having the emotional center of it feel very real. I know myself, and I have a feeling, I didn't look over at you because I had a feeling, but I was like, pretty much from that night ride with Terence Mann and Ray, and them talking about, his dad and everything, from that moment on, I just welled up and never lost that. Like, that is an emotional that just sticks with you. And I know you're, right now, I can see you're having a very tough time, keeping it together, understandably. But we try to be real on here. We're very open and we talk, but this is the beauty of film, right? Sometimes it's hard when you connect. And this is one of those moments where you go, yeah, I feel every piece of that ending.
Well, because and I think that's the genius of it, is this movie, this movie's, it's emotional terrorism, like, cause it leads you in with, it's a cute baseball movie. No, it's not. Yeah. I think, one of the things that's, like, interesting is, like, the test audiences, when the original cut of the film, he doesn't say dad when he asks him to have a catch. And the test audiences said, no, he needs to say it because his wife has never met his father. And I went, ouch. Like, and they said, they're like, it would sound better with it. That was actually informed by test audiences. That wasn't originally how it was written in the script. I'm so glad it's in there. As I look at my tear-stained notes of that scene, because I agree with you, like, from the moment where you kind of get the sense of, and I would say why this is not a twist is because when you look at the context of everything that's being said, it seems like it's being done for these baseball players, but it's not. He's doing this for his dad. Like, everything when you look back at it, from, you look at, if you build it, he will come. It's not plural, it's he. If you build this, your dad's going to show up. Ease his pain. And in that, you have woven the obviously the fractured nature of their relationship. You have the fact that, like, earlier in the film, like, and I believe it's during the opening narration. No, it's actually when he's saying this to Annie. He says, by the time he was as old as I am now, he was ancient.
Yeah.
And it's that idea of, like, all of, like, kind of the hopes and dreams, I think, that probably come with, like, all of our life's ambitions and goals and what we get to and what we don't, and how, maybe the next generation looks at that. And certainly that's, like, part of their relationship, and you're going the distance. Like, and it all, you realize by the end of the film, this is all about his dad. It's not about this baseball team.
Yeah. And please, by all means, anybody listening, this is not a film that we believe you had to, unfortunately lose somebody in order to connect with. If you have strife with, a parent, or just normal, growing pains. Like, I think you can understand, this if you lost anybody in your life over time. So there's a lot of different ways. And just life, again, kind of life experience can make you connect. You and I, hit it on its most exact way. And I think there's something to it, Ray talks about this, in the van, again, kind of going back to that moment to lead to this, which is this, like, what Ray's kind of doing is, like, he's trying to almost make amends for what he lost and didn't have an opportunity to do it in while his father was here, and everything going forward he's trying to do to almost make amends, spiritually, in whatever way they can. And then to get to this moment, And again, all the credit to Costner, who just plays this part once the realization of what's happening, and he has to keep it together because he realizes that his dad doesn't know who he is. This version of him. And well, yes, I know that there's a moment that that hits, but I think it's just, and he's trying to hold it together the whole time, and Costner navigates this very complicated set of emotions that are going on internally while he's trying to introduce his dad to his granddaughter, but can't introduce her that way.
And I think you're supposed to know that Annie and the daughter know who he is. I think
they do.
There's
but I'm saying, but his dad at this point doesn't.
Yeah.
Until we get to
Ugh.
The catch.
Yep. Stupid, terrible line.
The catch that has, made grown men and grown women weep.
Yes.
And cry tears for years and years, and will continue.
There's whole articles that are written of why Field of Dreams makes so many people cry. And it's well, yeah, because there's, and again, I agree entirely with you. I don't think you need to have the specifics of Ray's situation to feel something about this. I don't relate to everything, that I cry to. Or granted, I'm an easy cry, but I don't think you have to relate to it. There's just something very emotional about seeing this guy who's been on this quest, has given himself over entirely to this, has risked his family property, his financial stability, how people view him, to do this thing that feels pretty selfless. I don't think he knows he's doing this for his dad. He ultimately is, but I don't.
Well, he is, because he, and I think Terence says that, right? You're trying to bring his hero back. You can't bring him back, so you're going to bring his hero back.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't, again, I'll be 100% honest on the show. I feel that every day. I feel every day I'm trying my best to do something to keep my dad or my mom, alive, or make up for stuff. And, it's just, yeah, it just hits. And, all right, listen, you and me, we see a whole team of therapists. So, anybody that's stuck out through this, we gave you forewarning at the beginning. Like this movie, we let you know what was coming. And I don't want to speak too much for you, but I know you feel that. I know that is, hits very, very close to home to you.
Well, and podcast audience will be very honest. We had to go re-record a part of this because we're starting to lose it. Because I think where this movie is so, and this is what I love about film, is it does this. It gives you the space to kind of enact any emotion that you need to, that maybe you can't express. Somebody does it for you because you realize there is so much of anyone you've ever lost that you're just trying to kind of carry them with you and do right by them and do honor to them, in whatever relationship that is. And I think there's so much of wanting to know that we can believe in something, that we can have these far-flung ideas, that hope exists and is alive, and to see the present signs of that. We all want that. That feels universal. That transcends whether you think of this movie as a dad movie, a baseball movie, a ghost movie, whatever you think of it as, a Kevin Costner movie. What this movie obtains, I think, is so much grander, and it's such a human story.
Yeah. Who would have thought a movie made in 1989 would hit me 30-some years later as a 42-year-old adult and go, oh, you see me.
Yes.
You hear me. You just made this movie about baseball players from the 1919 World Series or whatever, I might have had the year wrong, come out of corn, but you have connected with me at some deep emotional level. It is like we said, the beauty of art.
Yeah. Because, and that's, yeah, you're 100% right, because it is. It's, you feel seen and present, and it's fractured, really, some of the most fraught relationships we can have in our life are with our parental figures, in whatever form they come to us in. And and this film deals head on with that and deals with regret and stuff that, hits really hard on a personal level. But at the same time, I recognize the universality in the message too. It's, yes, it hits me subjectively, But I also recognize why people come to this film, because it's like Terence Mann's speech. Like, it's about that line of cars, because people are drawn to things that don't need to be explained, but just are and just exist and just bring you some sense of peace or hope or help you return to something. That's what the end of the film is, that beautiful lineup of the cars, which was entirely, locals of Dyersville lined up. Just to have the opportunity to do so, and to be able to have this grand ending to this film. They only had, so they essentially did this at like the twilight hour, which if, as anyone knows, like, you don't have a lot of time to shoot this. They had one night to do it because they had all these cars lined up. Kevin Costner could not mess up that catch with his dad.
Well, Dwyer Brown, who played John Casella, he had to use the old-timey mitt. He said he was petrified.
Yes. Yeah, because they both talked about that, of like how terrifying it was, because you had all of these elements. They had the helicopter shot. They had to coordinate. They were using local AM, FM to be able to coordinate to the cars.
Town-wide blackout so they could get the lights.
Exactly.
1,500 cars.
Yep. And local cars. Like, this was just people who came out, and they said that, well, that's just kind of Iowa. And the thing is I'm like, we've been to Iowa. That is just kind of Iowa. I believe it. I believe that they got in their cars and they didn't think anything of it. It so speaks to Terence Mann's speech.
Yeah. And kind of, moving to a more, humorous moment with this is we're talking about this ending. So the funny part about that is if you see that, it's a one-lane road coming in, which is really what it was. And what happened is you had 1,500 cars lined up on a one-lane road, which was great for the shot. Problem was, once that shot was done, everybody had to figure out how to back out or turn around, and they said it caused a traffic jam for like almost the entire next day, trying to get the cars turned around and out of there.
You and I have gone down that dirt road. I still can't get how they did it. I'm surprised they're not still trying to clear up that traffic jam. So obviously this film is iconic, incredible, cannot recommend enough to go visit the Field of Dreams in Dyersville, Iowa. You will not regret it. But it brings us to Oscar or not. So the Oscar race this year is really interesting. So this is nominated for Best Picture, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Original Score. It wins none of that.
I'm glad that it got nominated. I was a little worried you were going to tell me it wasn't even nominated. But what does it lose to? Do you know?
Come on, Tassi, I know. Driving Miss Daisy.
Oh, good God.
Yeah. So a film that has
You know what the holdup for this show is? The fact that Driving Miss Daisy won the Best Picture over Field of Dreams. And probably something else that was nominated.
Well, and so this is the Oscar race that year. So it's Born on the 4th of July, Driving Miss Daisy, Dead Poets Society, My Left Foot, and Field of Dreams.
So did Driving Miss Daisy win because it got the least amount of votes? Like...
that movie.
Never mind.
That movie was an Oscar darling that year. Listen, there is a lot to discuss with that, because 100% that movie does not hold up. It didn't hold up then. It certainly does not hold up now.
It was the Green Book of 1989.
Yes, it was. Other notable films that were not nominated for Best Picture that year: Glory and Do the Right Thing.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, it's a real mistake, Oscars here. Because...
Do the Right Thing not being nominated is just... Yeah. Completely
It's only nominated for one award. I believe it's in Best Supporting Actor.
Not even writing.
No.
Speaking of supporting actor, I'm shocked that Ray Liotta or James Earl Jones don't get supporting actor.
No, it's really honestly something, and I think this happens where there are, certainly as we talk about, like, obviously big Oscars fan, but like I certainly know Oscars get it wrong like quite frequently, and this is 100% one of those years. Because you don't really have... And the interesting thing is, too, is if you look at who wins... So actor in a leading role that year was Daniel Day-Lewis, won for My Left Foot. Actor in a supporting role went to Denzel Washington for Glory, which obviously very well deserved, both of those roles. But it is shocking that you don't have a presence from Field of Dreams nominated, and like a really good argument as to why. Now, I think you put James Earl Jones in a supporting role against Denzel Washington's portrayal in Glory. I still give it to Denzel Washington, but although I think you can make certainly an argument that that the role of Terence Mann is a leading role. I think you can make that argument. He's in a significant part of the film.
I always have a hard time with dual leads.
Same.
And I mean, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So so no, it was not rewarded. But this is the thing. that film is rewarded by the amount of people who talk about it, the amount of people who rewatch it, who go out to Dyersville, Iowa. The fact that there is now, hopefully going to be a yearly tradition of a Major League Baseball game being played on that most iconic of fields in the middle of that corn down that dusty one-lane road. The fact that two grown people, who talk about film all the time and have talked about this movie quite a lot, can still get choked up in a prepared conversation about it. This film has stood the test of time. I believe it will continue to. It's an incredible piece of American filmmaking. It's incredibly well acted, well written, well directed, well scored. And bring your tissues and bring a need for optimism, because you'll certainly find it in this film.
Yeah, I mean, at its core, it's just a story about dreams of the past, the present, the future, and believing in something bigger than you. Don't get much better in film than that.
Should the How Could You Be? How could it take us this long to finally talk about Field of Dreams, perhaps?
Fair.
Well, if you're not currently following us on social media, please follow us at How Could You Podcast on Instagram, at How Could You Pod on Twitter. You can always email us suggestions and thought to howcouldyoupodcast@gmail.com. We have 2 more episodes coming to you this season, one about Goodfellas and one that's going to be a special interview episode, which we'll be previewing on our Instagram page, so please take a look out for that. And of course, my birthday episode, which will be E.T., the Extraterrestrial, on July 7th.
And to our dads, we miss you. This one was for you. We hope you're enjoying the Odyssey.